All right, welcome back to Brain Fog Chess with Untitled Amateur and Intermediate player Nico Brayton. I'm reviewing today a game from the May Tuesday Night Swiss Tournament, round 3, rather than the $15 Open Tournament, which I'm currently in the middle of reviewing, because those games were all on the same day, all in a row, and 60 minutes. So the last 2 rounds, I feel like no one was playing that well. We were all pretty tired, certainly me included. I have a win and a loss from there, but I'll review them both later. Whereas the May Tuesday Night Swiss, 90 minutes, everyone's fresh. You only play the one game per night, and the level of play is just so much higher. And this game is no exception. This was an awesome game. I thought I played great. I thought my opponent played great. And I was totally unprepared for it, so it was great. Going into this game, I was originally paired as white against Justin, so I was preparing a bunch of e4, e5 stuff. And then I got there and I was like, oh, I'm now black against Joseph Puig Ruiz, who I've never played before. I have no idea what he plays. So all of a sudden I'm going in as black. That's great. Not. Yeah. I knew a little bit about Joseph's playing style, or at least I had the opportunity to, from the YouTube channel of the one and only Rob Exter, who is my inspiration for this channel. He had a YouTube channel where he reviews club games at Boylston for much longer than me. I really love his videos. I think he does a great job analyzing them. I think if you're a club player, making a YouTube channel where you analyze your games is just a great idea. And yeah, Rob does a really good job breaking down his ideas and his calculation flow and all that. So yeah, big shout out to Rob. Also, thanks for shouting me out, Rob. I appreciate it. Um, so yeah. Anyway, going into this game, I have 1.5 points out of 2. That's a bye and a win. And same exact situation for Joseph. So yeah, evenly matched. Our ratings are about the same, like 1350. And I think we're also both kind of on a rating climb. So maybe we're both a little underrated. I think I'm underrated. I think Joseph's underrated. I think we were a very evenly matched like pair. I thought the game was awesome. So super excited for this. It was a Grand Prix attack. I hit him with my usual Sicilian, hits me with a closed Sicilian, and after e6 we get f4. That's the Grand Prix. The way I like to play this is to play a6. This looks passive, but it's engine approved. The idea is that if you just play the normal knight c6, white has some additional options like bishop b5, trying to trade off your knight, or bishop c4, which is actually even good after white prepares d4. These are the 2 lines that Gotham Chess recommends in his opening videos. Sorry, there's AC. I hope it's not too distracting. I'll turn it off. It's a little hot out still, although not as bad as the last 2 days, which were miserable. Oh my god. But yeah, Gotham Chess recommends these 2 lines where you bring the bishop out like this to either c4 or b5, like in the Grand Prix, and a6 just kind of dispels with those. Because not a lot of intermediate club players know the main line where you just fianchetto. Here, Joseph plays f3. I play knight c6 now that my knight cannot be traded off, and Joseph plays the move a3, which to me felt like confirmation that this was a Gotham Chess watcher, because I saw no idea with this move besides bringing the bishop out to c4 and being able to put the bishop on a2 after I kick it. With either d5 or b5. So I thought this was just a great time to just play d5, take the center, and prevent the bishop from coming to c4 ever. White responds with d3, which felt weird to me because I thought he was trying to bring his bishop out, but I guess now he realizes he can't. I thought this move was a bit passive and silly because I can just play d4 and the knight has to come here. As it turns out, this is actually the best. These are the best 2 engine moves. This is the correct setup for white in the Grand Prix, where you do fianchetto the bishop. Joseph actually knew his opening theory and ideas super well, as the next couple of moves, maybe like 10 moves, will show you. He played this opening just great. Anyway, here it's, I think, Joseph's turn. No, it's not it's my turn. I played knight f6. I'm really not afraid of e5 because that just gives me the d5 square. Let's see. And Joseph plays h3. Another move, I was like, what are you doing and why? I'm not really threatening knight g4. to go to e3 because I have bigger fish to fry. But turns out that h3 is the best engine move, and you'll see why. After b5, which is not the best engine move, but totally okay. It's about even right now. Joseph plays g4. h3 was preparing g4, and this is a very nasty line where white has a huge kingside attack brewing, as you see, and I don't really want to castle. Nor does white. So we're both going to keep our kings in the center like bozos and duke it out. Here I thought for a while, I'll say that I don't love my time management in this game. Joseph had a 20-minute time advantage at one point, in equal positions or even ones where he was a little better. So I was clearly not managing my time the best. But here I had a lot to think about because like the G4, the G pawn, the F pawn, and the E pawn can all advance, and I want to figure out what's scary. Also the H pawn, not the H pawn because I'm just taking on G4 in that situation. But yeah, I figured the E pawn advance is not scary. Again, it gives me the D5 square. The G pawn advance is not scary because my knight just comes to H5. Ah, the sweet sounds of Boston. And yeah, my knight's totally fine on H5. But maybe the F pawn push is scary, and this is kind of the thematic break for white in the Grand Prix. And there's a lot of lines where white can make it early. And even at the cost of a pawn, and just get a devastating kingside attack. So I was scared of that. I think too scared of that, which is why I played my move g6. Just adding a road spike against f5, where now, after we trade things off, white's going to try to wait as long as possible to not trade with the e4 pawn probably, because that, again, gives me the d5 square. So my voice is so shot. I really hope this works. But I figure here, not only am I winning a pawn, but I haven't castled, so breaking things open like this isn't really justified for white. Yeah, so that's what I did here. Joseph plays knight g3, one of the best engine moves, putting more attention on the f5 square, and also perhaps preparing g5, where my knight can't really go to h5 now, or it's going to get traded off to the detriment of my pawn structure. Sorry, I'm going to take a water break. Dang, okay. Yeah, here I spent way too long and played another kind of silly move. I played bishop b7. I don't know why I didn't play bishop g7. After making this move, I kind of looked at it and was like, didn't you just prepare to fianchetto? Turns out this is not so bad, but it's like plus 0.5 now. Because I guess I can argue that my g6 pawn isn't there for a fianchetto, but just to prevent f5. Although honestly my bishop should be on g7 here. The best plan for white, I think, is actually maybe to go... No, white plays one of the best moves. White brings out the bishop, and I bring out the bishop. But you'll note that when I bring out the bishop, I'm removing a defender of the f5 square, right? On c8, my bishop works with my e6 pawn to defend f5. And now I think white has this break. White can go f5, and maybe follow it up with something like g5. Now that's defended too, and this looks a bit scary. But white plays things a bit slower with bishop d2, and here I play queen c7. This is again playing against f5, because now if you go f5, you lose because I take your knight with check. And so Joseph plays what I thought was a pretty reasonable move, e5. I was happy to see this, of course, but it does prevent any of my ideas with queen c7. But it also makes f5 a little worse. So my knight comes, of course, to d5, and then Joseph pretty quickly plays knight e4. Joseph was showing me after the game that he made a note here of just a sign for a diagonal, because he was like, what the heck is going on in this diagonal? The long a8, h1 diagonal has literally one piece on every single possible square. There are 8 pieces on that diagonal. That's kind of rare. So we're having a horse convention in the center. Yeah, so here I thought for a little bit, and I found the best move. I'm very happy to say that I found the best move because it's super unintuitive. It's actually knight e3 check, or not check, queen guard. You're like the queen, not the king. This looks stupid because you're giving up a pawn. This pawn is not defendable. But actually, black has a pretty nasty follow-up here, which I unfortunately did not find. So I gave up a pawn for nothing. So intuitively, I kind of felt that this move was right, but then afterwards, I pretty quickly came up with the wrong follow-up. Of course, what I was hoping was that white would just go for the pawn immediately, after which knight d4 is really, really strong. because you can't take the pawn because you get forked. This is a huge fork. You definitely lose. So knight d4 tactically defends the e3 pawn. And if you take the knight, well, then I take back with a pawn, and this wedge of pawns is just winning for black, I think. And if you go something like here, then I think I just take the knight. Or actually, maybe I take this knight. And yeah, my knight just gets in. And this is what I should have gone for. I'll show you why. There's another way to go for this exact same line, even at the cost of a pawn. It's much better for black. In this position, white sees my idea and plays c3, stopping my knight from getting in. But as you just saw from the recommendation of ChessBase, actually knight a5 here is like minus 1.5. Is really, really powerful. And this is the correct and only correct follow-up to knight e3. It doesn't defend the pawn because white can play queen e2. But here, the idea is that you play bishop takes knight. This is good for a couple of reasons. I played this move later for one of those reasons, that being that when the knight comes into f6, it's really annoying because I have to take with the bishop, and then there's a pawn that comes into f6 that can quickly be followed up with a pawn coming onto g5, and that edge is similarly, I think, just winning for white. So you take the knight, and there's another critical part of this that I missed. White has to take back with the pawn, and that allows you to play c4. c4, and there's no d4, which would be a great pawn structure for white. Instead, white would follow up by taking the pawn. My knight comes in, or better yet, castle first. White can't castle here because, boom, you're getting pinned, and although you can block it with this knight, the knight is coming under a lot of fire, so this is very good for black. And after something like this, you could trade, give a check, and bring your knight in. And this is the setup that justifies the pawn sacrifice for black. I needed to see that I can castle and trade the bishop for the knight on e4, use that to push my c4 pawn in, clamp the queen side, and get a monster knight, and play for the weakness of the dark squares on black's king side. Because wow, my voice is so screwed. Okay, I'm gonna have more water. Yeah, here, this diagonal is just so weak, and we have an opposite colored bishop middle game, which benefits the attacking side, which is me, because white's king is in the center, and I have all the open lines. So, kind of a mature thing to realize that I didn't quite see. But yeah, it's things like this that I want to get better at. You know, sacrificing a pawn for positional compensation, visualizing possible sequences and evaluating the resulting position, not for the tactical potential, although there is tactical potential here with pins and such, but just for the kind of evaluation of the position, like who is better here, who has the lines, who has the better pawn structure, who has the control of the open file, etc. And I think that because everything that I just listed benefits black, it's totally worth it to sacrifice a pawn. The engine agrees this is minus 2 at this point. Unfortunately, I didn't find knight a5. Instead, I played a much worse move. Knight a5 was the only way to find an advantage for black. Everything else equalizes or is a little worse. The move that I played, I think white's a little better. It's like plus 0.8. I played b4. White goes after my pawn. I trade. I figured I could just explode the queen side here and that would benefit me. So I bring my rook to d8. White takes my pawn. I castle, and white's a good deal better here. Turns out my rook was better placed on b8, which makes sense because it's my other rook that wants to come to d8. But white plays g5, which I guess is good. If you, oh no, I had a slightly better move order here. Here I first brought my knight to a7, which induces either the move a4 or c4, because you can't really allow my knight to come in like this, or it's just too good. Joseph played c4. Now I castle, and now Joseph plays g5. The difference here is pretty big to the position that we just saw, because here my bishop can take the knight. The knight is moved away from c6. That's just what I do, because g5 is not as good in this position, because the clamp on the f6 square matters a heck of a lot less if you have no knight to bring into f6. Here you don't take with the pawn, because actually for the exact same reason as the pawn sacrifice position we were just discussing, black is better here. You no longer, of course, get the knight to b3, but you get the knight to this monster square in the center. And because, I guess white can castle, but because black has all the open lines, black is better. Black is not a -2, as I was in the previous position. It's more like -0.5. But yeah, you take back with the queen to preserve your pawn structure and the potential of breaking with d4. Of course, I bring my knight here. And now white castles. And now I kind of realized that my rook had been misplaced on d8, and I bring it back to b8. White plays this move, rook fb8, just trying to trade pieces because he's up a pawn. And here is where I was the most sort of under pressure and thinking I was losing of the whole game. I'm down a pawn, where I don't have, where the open file is contested, so I don't have it personally. And white is just trying to trade everything off, be up a pawn in the endgame. Obviously, white's not going to trade off everything but the bishops, because then we have an opposite colored bishop endgame, which is a draw. But I figured even if he does that, he's playing for 2 results, and I wanted to play for a win, because I'm taking so many buys this month that I would like to get some wins. So yeah, here I was pretty sad. And because I was stressed and under some time pressure, honestly, I had 24 minutes here, and Joseph had 44. He had played the last like 10 moves really, really quickly, just putting pressure on my clock, which is fair. And they were good moves too. So here I played a silly move, just playing for tricks. Don't just play for tricks. I played knight d4. The idea is you can't take twice because of the pin. I'll show you what I mean. Knight takes, pawn takes. If queen takes, black just simply wins because of this pin. So you don't take with the queen. Instead, white played the move queen z6 here. And he was like, oh, dang, I traded off the knights for nothing. White's d-pawn is no longer weak because I can't target it with my semi-open file, because I gummed that semi-open file up with my own d-pawn. White's going to trade off everything and simply be up a pawn, and I am cooked. Or at least, you know, white's the only one pushing. I have no chance in this position. And then I saw something that made me realize that going into the endgame is actually quite okay for me. Maybe you can see it too. There's a really interesting sequence where you use the opposite colored bishops to your own advantage as black. Trade the queens. Trade the rooks. Take this pawn. This is playing right into white's hands, right? Because what white wants to play is what he played in the game. Rook a1. Being like, yeah, I've just skewered you and I'm going to win your pawn back. But here I have a really, really nice sequence. Bishop b2. Giving up the pawn. And not this. Not bishop c3, but bishop c1. And there's no defense of the f4 pawn. And then once I take the f4 pawn, the g5 and e5 pawns are both hanging. It costs a tempo to defend the e5 pawn with the rook, and it costs a tempo to defend the h4 pawn with the pawn. But in that time, I could also get behind both pawns and start mopping up even more. So I figured I'm either winning here or it's a draw. The only thing I have to worry about is the c4 pawn. And it turns out that white had a defense here to maintain a better position. After I take here, if white had simply brought the king in and not bothered with this bishop, now I think white is like a little bit better. Because let's say I don't know, do something like this and the bishop drops back. Or say the bishop drops back here. I think white is threatening this now. Because, oh no, white's not. Yeah, white's gonna march the king in and defend this pawn first. Now that the pawn is defended, I have nothing better than to hold on to my a pawn, and I am the one with the outside passed pawn, but I have a much weaker pawn structure. My d4 pawn is eternally weak. I guess my bishop should probably be living on c3, where it defends both pawns, but it's kind of out of the game, to be honest, and white can try to push their c pawn. I can't really push my a pawn. So white's a little better in this endgame. But of course, not what happens. we got this position where white plays h4. I win the pawn, and white defends the e-pawn. Here I go after the h-pawn, of course. And this is a drawn endgame, even though it looks like I'm winning all of the kingside pawns, because white's c-pawn is actually quite fast here, and my bishop is locked behind a wall of pawns, and it will take a while to eat them all. So if white plays bishop d7, that's the drawing move, because actually, if I just gobble greedily, this is quite dangerous for me. I'm gonna have to give up a bishop eventually for a pawn and draw the resulting game because I have 3 extra pawns. But instead, white went for the wrong plan, which was centralizing the king. In many endgames, it's good to centralize the king. These are all the moves we saw in the game. But here, yeah, I see the point. White's gonna try to take my d pawn, and then have connected pass pawns and start marching both d and c pawns down. But you didn't really need the support of the d pawn. And this gives me time to take all the pawns and get my bishop back into the defense. So in this position, I'm proud to say that I found the only winning move. I don't really know why I found this. I just figured it was a good intermezzo. And I'm still struggling to understand exactly why it's the only winning move. But I think I appreciate it more now than I did during the game. It's rook c8. It makes sense to just go here. But actually, if you give white the time... white would play c5 here. If you give white the time to get this setup with the pawn on c6 and the bishop on d7, that's a sort of self-sufficient setup against my rook, right? My rook can't do anything against either of those pieces, and white has time for the idea of bringing the rook to the b file and then bringing the rook to b7, force trading my rook, and my bishop is locked behind the dark squared pawns, and white's promoting on b8. So this is quite dangerous, and I think I have to give up a lot of material in order to defend. It's still a draw, but that was the critical plan for white if I give them time. But if you play rook c8, this setup is much harder to achieve because your pawn didn't have the tempo to play c5, so you can't defend the bishop with the pawn. You'd have to move the bishop. The best move, I think, is bishop back, probably, or to throw in an intermezzo check. But now my rook is kind of optimally placed, and I'm having time to stop this pawn in its tracks. So even if the king comes in, now I think I probably have this check, and... yeah, this is much more balanced, but I'm pretty happy with my kingside pawn storm. Yeah, so this is not what happened in the game. White did not find the most resilient response. White played bishop e7, which is a mistake because it's much harder to go for a setup with a pawn on c6 and a rook on d7 because the rook has, sorry, unlike in the position where white's wedge, here, I'll show this one more time. I'm going to play stupid moves. Okay. This setup is very achievable and winning for white. I played really stupid moves as black, that's why. But this is a very good plan for white because, well, you see why. You're trading the rook and the pawn is promoting on b8 and my pawn's too slow. The equivalent setup with the bishop on b7 doesn't work. The reason why is because if I make similarly stupid moves, there's no rook d5, right? My pawn is guarding that square. That's kind of why, actually. And it's much slower for the rook to get in. There's not even rook d8. The rook is not getting to that critical d7 square. And so it's just the wrong, you've flipped the right idea, but your rook doesn't have a way in. So that's why rook c8 is so good. It makes it much harder for white to find their kind of only winning plan. And here white didn't find it. Went rook b7, and now after rook c7, rook b5, white's pieces are kind of just really awkwardly placed. This pawn isn't really pushing anytime soon. Well, I guess it is, but I'm blockading it just fine. You're not really, it's taking a lot of tempi for white to get their rook to b7. And they can't really get it to d7, so I have so much time for my kingside pawn storm. Obviously, the best move is to defend the pawn. But I figured I have so much time for the king time pawn storm, and also the c5, the c4 pawn is. I thought it was pretty fast. I didn't see that I've kind of fully blockaded it, so I actually went h5. Still winning, but not nearly as convincing. Okay, I should be done soon. My voice is so done. Hopefully, I'm like actually intelligible. Okay, after white takes the pawn, I keep pushing. White brings the bishop back, blockading me. Here I make a mistake that gives up my advantage, but we're both playing really fast because I'm at like, how much time do I have? I think I have about 14 minutes left, and white has about 28, so still double my time, but obviously trying to put pressure on my clock. I think we both thought I was winning here, but I'm not after f6. After f6, white should trade, and note that my kingside pawn structure is a lot weaker than it was before. So even if white gives up the bishop, it's much more harder. Even if we trade rooks, it's much more difficult for me to pawn storm this bishop. 2 pawns against a bishop, the bishop can sort of defend. 3 connected pawns against the bishop cannot. Instead, white played c5. I pushed. White has this drawing move bishop b8, rook b8 in a lot of lines. I don't really see why. I guess you're trying to get to h8, but not if I put my king on g7. But maybe it's for this idea. You'll see what happened. White played c5. I played f5. White played c4. C6. I played king f7, which I think Joseph thought was a blunder, because of course there's this. Not that. That's actually the good move. There's this, force trading the rooks. But I have the only move that saves the game and preserves an advantage for black, which is bishop d8. And this is a fascinating position because it looks like white is just getting in and promoting their pawn. But actually, with the move, of course, king c5. But actually, king c5, which white played, is a losing mistake, and I calculated the win from here. Maybe you can find it too. If you're watching on YouTube, pause the video, as they say. But of course, everyone's watching on YouTube because I'm not a Twitch streamer and never will be, for moral reasons. I'm not actually. Yeah, the winning move is rook takes rook, which looks crazy because isn't there king c6? After king c6, though, you can just take this pawn. But you might ask, doesn't the king just get in? Don't you lose your bishop? You do lose your bishop. But it takes a heck of a lot of time for white to make you lose your bishop. And in that amount of time, your pawn storm has become decisive. This is completely winning for white. A bishop cannot defend against 3 connected passed pawns. White's king is completely misplaced, and this d-pawn is not passed. That was the line I calculated. White has the slightly more resilient move, which I had calculated as well, which he played in the game. After king c6, I actually dropped back. I didn't take the pawn immediately. Which this is still winning. I figured white would have to go here. Now I would take the pawn. And this is 1 tempo slower. I don't know why this is what I'd calculated. But yeah, this is winning too, as we see. But white didn't play king d7 because white saw this. White played d4. But that allows my king to come in to e7. And yeah, this is quite strong. In fact, it's completely winning for black because I've set up a blockade. There's no way this white king is getting to a7, c7, d7. It's all blocked by my king and bishop. And my king is kind of inextricable from its position because it's on a dark square. And white only has a light square bishop. So I won the game, but I'll show you how I won. White pushed, I took, white took. Here I'm sort of forgetting the moves. So let me double check. Let me quickly double check. I was doing it all by memory up to here. But at this point, I don't think I have it memorized anymore. D4, yeah. Okay. Yeah, king c6. Yeah, okay, cool. White played king c5. I played g5. I played d5. I took on e5. White takes. I take back. White gives a check. I bring my king back to just defend the pawn. This is all happening very, very quickly because neither of us has too much time left. King c4, trying to defend. Bishop e8. I figured I don't want to blunder this move at any point, which loses because white can now queen. So it's kind of patient and responsible to just bring the bishop back. King d3. King d6. Bishop h1. King e5. It all makes sense, right? King e2. Just bring the king back to defend. King f4. King f2. g4. Now bishop c6. Because after g3 check and king g1, interesting move. I think g2 might have been stronger. If I play king e3, which I did in the game, white has this bit of an annoying move here. Yeah, bishop d7. Oh my gosh. In all these positions, I actually have played h3 already. It doesn't make a single difference at all, but I'll show you where I played h3. I'm so sorry I missed this. It doesn't really make a difference. In this position, way back here, I played h3. Because, of course, this trade is completely winning for me. Right? There's no longer any counterplay that white has, and I'm just going to march my pawns, and I'll slowly win the game. So here, white played bishop h1, and this is what we had in the game. It's the exact same sequence. I'm just going to make it. I think this is what we got, what we just had, right? Something like this. Yeah, something like this. Yeah, because in this position, white has, yeah, this is right. White had the slightly annoying move, bishop d7, and I had to bring my king back to f4. Yeah, and bishop back to c6. Of course, white is fine with the draw. King g5. Just getting ready to push my pawns. Bishop d7. And here I saw that I had g2 because my bishop guards the h2 square. So this, of course, would be winning because I'm queening my h-pawn. So I think in this position, white saw that white has to bring their bishop back to c6 and sacrifice. I play king g4. And white sacks the bishop for 2 pawns because they have to. Otherwise, I'm queening. Now, my friend Liam was watching this game because he had won his game pretty quickly and was watching most of our game. He thought that white does not have to sacrifice here. Like white could just move the bishop once. Because wait, why did I think white didn't need to sacrifice? Oh, I think he was looking at some positions where I bring my king all the way in, and he was like, now you sacrifice for stalemate. This is stalemate. They never work because I have an interim check, forcing the king onto a square where what I take was check, and then I win. But both Joseph and I after the game were like, oh my gosh, was there a draw due to this stalemate trick, which I think is important to know, and I didn't know it. But there are positions where there is no interim move for black, no interim check, where a move like a timely sacrifice like bishop g2 now would actually be stalemate. It's kind of interesting. So white played on for good reason. That turns out there were some tricks. But I think in this position, after I play, king g4, white's best move is to sacrifice because if you just wait around, I'm not playing king g3. I'm actually giving this check, which is winning. And I think, yeah, this is not, there's no stalemate trick here. Yeah. So I think it was right for white to sacrifice. But this position is, of course, a win for black. What's interesting is if you remove my bishop and white's pawn, it's a draw. Because white has the opposition. But because I have a bishop, I can just use my bishop to lose tempi when I need to and make sure that I always have the opposition, which is why it's a win. So let's see. King takes g2, f4, because I can. And then king f1, actually it would be a blunder if there was no pawn and bishop, because this position with the kings in opposition, the king in front of the pawn is always a win for the side with the pawn. And this is where Joseph resigned. But even if you go here, I can just start pushing the pawn. And there aren't any stalemate tricks, because in this kind of critical position, I'm not going to play king f3 stalemate. I'm just going to play bishop f7. And white can promote, but I take it. And that gives me the tempo loss that I need to bring my king to the escort square and promote. Anyway, so that was the game. Amazing game. Joseph was better for a while in the opening, had some really good pressure on the king side. Then I was better for a hot moment when I had that knight e3 idea that I was super proud of. Right, this one here. But I missed the correct follow-up after c3 of knight a5, which is what I'm trying to take from this game. That I gotta calculate a little further and figure out what position correctly justifies the pawn sacrifice. Of course, it is this position that justifies the pawn sacrifice. Right here. This is just phenomenal because of your control of c5. And then let's see. Then I was happy with I was very, very happy with the way that we got into an endgame because, of course, I'm getting in. Let's see, I played 97. Yep, this is... I did in fact play 97 here. Sorry, I'm just reviewing the whole game. Yeah, it's queen takes, right? Yep, this is where we got into an endgame. Oh, no, that was not the move. And I was super proud of this idea of bishop b2 to c1 to take all these dark squared pawns. Of course, I was also really proud of the rook c8 idea, although I still didn't quite understand. I guess now I didn't understand during the game why I was so strong, but I guess it was kind of one of those moves where it can't be bad, it can only be good. So that was kind of a critical moment as well. Really not proud of f6, which blunders the game, not to a loss, but to a draw. And then super proud of the find. H3, bishop h1, king f7, rook b7, forced bishop d8, king c5. Really proud of this find, which I found was winning because of the blockade. And the idea of, like, I calculated all these moves. I calculated takes, there, takes, and I evaluated this position as winning. Now, that's not like that hard, but it was a lot of calculation, and it resulted in a sacrifice and an evaluation of a position as completely winning because I saw sort of vaguely what the plan was. This is a sort of toy example where a much more, advanced example of doing that exact same thing would have been finding that darn move knight a5 earlier, right? A long calculation followed by an evaluation of the position as winning. Yeah. Anyway, so I learned a ton from this game. I thought Joseph played really great. He said afterward that it's just a very high level of play and he doesn't mind losing games like this. I agree. If I had lost this game, I would not have been sad about losing this game at all. I thought he played phenomenally. I got a bit lucky with being able to get my bishop in on the dark squares in the end game. But yeah, all in all, phenomenally played game. Really happy to review it, and I hope this was helpful.